Today on Crowdstack Snacks, we have a very special treat. We're going to start bringing you some interviews with friends of mine, colleagues, interesting people out there in the community space. And today I get to chat with Peter Staal of Bind Agency out of the Netherlands. He and his co founder, Kirsten Wagener, have founded the agency, which is all about fostering online communities, which is my jam. And they have recently written a book that is available today, especially for Community Manager Advancement Day. So make sure you go to Amazon and get your hands on this book because I really highly recommend it for anyone who's working in the community space right now. Okay, Peter, thanks for coming on today. I'd like to talk a little bit more about your amazing book, Organizing Communities. And I guess my first question that popped into my head is what triggered you to write this book, and what makes you think that now is the time to say what you'd like to say about online communities?
Thank you for having me, first of all. I think there were a lot of different reasons why I wrote the book. Obviously, I have a long time passion for communities. I think I've been a community manager from 2009 onwards. And the last 4 years, I've founded my own company together with my co-founder. And we've been helping companies, large and small, set up communities. So I firsthand noticed the power that communities could provide to organizations. And it's been also a lifelong goal to basically professionalize the community management field. I don't know how it's in the States, but in the Netherlands there still are a lot of junior positions being filled with community managers, while we think it should be a more senior strategic role. So it was also the goal of our book, I guess you would say, is to elevate the field of community managers both within and externally on the external community side.
It's really needed right now, especially with everyone talking about online community right now. I wholeheartedly agree that it's time to put some best practices down. And there have been some attempts and lots of good materials out there, but I really felt like um, the book was a great way for someone to come in and really take it seriously as a practice. So I think you hit the nail on the head. Um,
Yeah, thanks.
Something else that is really in the air right now in the community manager world, and something that's been really on my mind a lot, is this idea of what is the difference between an audience and a community? And there are a lot of, actually, I think it is a lot of the junior people coming into the field who maybe they're not confused, but they don't really understand the nuance between those two terms. And it's really important to have a grip on that. So I'm curious as to what your take is when you think about audience versus community.
Yeah, I think that's one of the first things we always try to explain to clients of ours is well, basically what you've been doing up until now. Not everyone, obviously, but the majority of companies, they've been addressing or talking to an audience, which is a very traditional way of communicating with a group of people. Although we've had the internet for over 20 years, I guess the behavior we still have is using those new network social tools in not in the way that they are best used, but actually using them to communicate your message across to a group of people. And what we're trying to do is create the actual message together with the people and then communicating with them. So basically, the role of an organization should not be the one solely communicating, but should be a role of equality with the group they're communicating with. And that's the basis or the premise, if you will, of a community.
It's so important to get that right in order to
Yeah.
have a successful community. I fully agree.
And I think it's also dependent on nowadays the role that customers they want to fulfill within a company. In the old days, a customer would just like to have a product, and I could say the last 5, maybe 10 years, the role has more and more become part of the company, co-creating products together with that company. And it can only be done if you're actually maybe not formal, but you have an informal role in the whole production creation process.
Right, with the company and also with each other, with other
Yeah,
members of the community.
yeah.
Definitely. You also have a section in the book that I found really fascinating, kind of a fresh take, at least for me, on how community ties together with the corporate structure and how do those two structures play off of each other, the way the community is organized and then the way the corporation is organized. Can you expand a little bit on that? And I enjoyed your take on the hire model too, a huge corporation that's doing something interesting.
Yeah, and I definitely think that's also the future, as I see it, of community. So what you have in the one hand is the companies that they operate through a command and control type operation, where there's authority structures in place, and people get paid to tell other people how to do and why to do the work, and that's totally different than what happens in the community, where there's more of an egalitarian structure, and everyone is equal to a certain extent, obviously. So those two worlds tend to collide quite often, and that's the trouble that we see when very traditional companies want to set up communities. Ultimately, it's a collision of two different work methods and two different structures. Now, what more and more companies are doing is that they're actually using inspiration from the communities they set up to think about new ways of working within the company. So maybe there's a sort of an ultimate structure where companies could more and more operate as a community, where there's obviously still people won't do that voluntarily. They need to get paid, but you could use things like intrinsic and extrinsic motivation to get people to work more and on more subjects they're passionate about than we're currently doing. And I think that's very exciting. And the one of the companies that's already doing that is Hire, which is a Chinese company. It started out as a very traditional company already 40 years ago, and they end up having a new CEO, and that was a person who really believed in new ways of working. And what he actually did is he basically made every employee sort of a co-owner of the company. So you're not actually working for hire, you're an entrepreneur. And within that entrepreneurship, you're free to explore different topics that are of interest to you. And if that topic, if you see that there's a potential topic that you like and that there's a potential audience for it, you can explore that. And if it becomes successful, then Hire ultimately would fund the project and buy stakes for that project. And that's the way that they're operating. So basically, there's not a single company that's called Hire. It's basically an ecosystem of different communities, entrepreneurs that are working together on different topics. And I think the best part of this company is that it made huge profits the last 20 years. And also it has more satisfied employees because they get to explore their own fascinations versus that they are enlisted in a hierarchical company and have to do, well, what's maybe not their best topic that they would like to explore.
Which do you think came first in that scenario? So is it that they had an amazing community concept and that fed over into the corporate organization, or was it the other way around?
I think they basically started off as a real traditional organization. So they had to reinvent themselves from scratch. And what they saw, and I guess what a lot of companies are seeing, if you don't have the speed to innovate real quickly, then you'll lose the battle that's going to come in the next couple of years. You see that in the Ubers, the Airbnbs, which basically destroyed hotels and taxi companies. And they saw that too, and they thought, well, what is the best way to innovate quickly? We need to be in close contact with our customers because they're the ones telling us how to work and when to work and on what we should work. And one way of doing that is to basically create micro communities, as they're called, with entrepreneurs that are in direct contact with those customers, and they have the speed and the decision-making power to, if a customer has a complaint or a wish, they can do that within a couple of weeks. So that community structure also allows Hire to innovate real quickly.
Which all comes down to trust, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of the behavioral techniques and ideas, principles, best practices that are in the community world, if you're doing it right, I think translate very effectively to the corporate organization. If you're watching this, go read the book. It's a really interesting take. It'll get your juices flowing, especially if you're an entrepreneur and running your own organization.
Yeah, and I think as an entrepreneur myself, and I see the reason I became an entrepreneur is because one of the main benefits is that you can explore your own passions, and if you can find that audience that is willing to follow along with you, and willing to at least pay to a certain amount, then you get this sense of autonomy and freedom, and it's very comparable to what happens, I guess, working voluntarily in an open source community on a subject you're very passionate about.
Actually, that's an amazing segue. Thank you, Peter. I wanted to ask you about why, thinking about being an effective community manager or running an effective community, one of the things that's suggested in the book and something that I often will recommend to people is being active in other communities. Why do you think it is that that's important, and what benefits do you think that will come back to you if you do something like that early in your career?
I think it allows you to do a lot of different things. It allows you to explore certain social networks and the features of how they work. It also allows you to firsthand experience the level of support you'll get if you engage with a crowd that's similar in certain respects to you. Um, I can imagine, for instance, myself, I am a member of a lot of different Facebook groups. I like to cook. I like to bake a lot. So there's a lot of pizza specialty groups on Facebook, and I engage with them quite regularly. And it's amazing to see how willing these people are to help each other out, even when there's no money involved or no stakes involved. They just like to see other people excel. And experiencing that firsthand, I think it's a major influence in how you view communities, not just as a business tool, but something that has value in its own right as well.
Yeah, I see community. It's not just a job, it's an adventure. And I
Yeah,
think you have to have that spirit of understanding in your soul what an online community can do when it's a good one. And like you, I have the same experiences out there being part of communities. And when you feel it viscerally like that, I think it's different than reading it or listening, watching videos or things like that. Those are good and it gives you a good grounding. But I think until you've firsthand had that moment where some stranger halfway across the world helps you for no reason other than you're part of the same community, that's a next level.
yeah, yeah. And they always tend to view the negative aspects of community, and obviously there are a lot of negative aspects. People that on Reddit, for instance, there's a lot of hateful content out there. I think that could be prevented if you have the right insights in how community operates and the moderation skills. But on the other hand, there's so many good things that you can accomplish. Think about what Wikipedia did, for instance, which is I think they started out as an experiment, an online experiment, and ultimately became the best encyclopedia worldwide. And they're doing that. The majority of the work is done by volunteers, which is awesome, I think.
Yeah, they're an amazing example. And, people like to pick on Reddit, but I am with you that, it kind of depends on the subreddit. Some of them are well moderated and good examples of community management, and some of them are just off the rails.
Yeah,
It's almost like a little microcosm of good community, bad community.
yeah,
I don't think you could paint it all with one brush. I've definitely been in subreddits where it's just so supportive and wonderful, and everybody's helping each other. So um, there's a spectrum out there.
yeah,
That's for
definitely.
sure. So something else that's in the atmosphere in the conversation right now, and you just sort of alluded to it, talking about Reddit and some of the larger platforms. There are definite pros and cons and different ways to run your community, different locations. There's the school of thought of go where your people are, school of thought of I'm going to build my own. And then there's like a flow, a continuum in between that. I'm wondering, what's your take on that? What do you see as some of the pros and cons of, okay, I'm going to say that my Twitter feed is my community, or things like that? What do you see as that continuum?
I think there's definitely room to do that. And if you want to test the water, one way to start is maybe experimenting with a Facebook group or with a LinkedIn group. Ultimately, I think it could be a dangerous road because those companies have different interests than the interests of your company and maybe your goal. And it would not be the first time that for instance, LinkedIn groups, they've been displayed and have been hidden previously and before. So we always say, if it's a business critical venture, I wouldn't do it on loaned property. I would do it on your own property. So it's your data. It's your responsibility for those people, for the privacy of those people. It's not Facebook. It's not LinkedIn. It's not Twitter. That's not to say that it can't be done, but I think on those platforms, these have been optimized for different things. These have been optimized to basically function as an ad network or as a content network, which is not necessarily what we were trying to do as community managers, bridging people and bringing people together.
The purpose of the platform is so important. That's exactly right. I agree. And especially being able to be on your own domain, off, getting the SEO value and all of that can be crucial for some
Yeah.
community.
And I don't know how it is in the States, but what we see a lot in the Netherlands as well is Facebook's reputation currently. It's not been that good because of the elections, because of privacy concerns. So once you go down that road, there's a lot of people that might not want to follow you because there have reasons not to be on Facebook anymore, for instance.
Yeah, we definitely are having that conversation right now. This is
Yeah,
your book is really timely because I think it puts structure, it puts the conversation in a context, I think, because there are a lot of talking heads out there and people discussing content moderation and community topics that aren't really grounded in the whole history and what has happened along the way. They aren't really aware of the evolution of things and the best practices that are in place. And there is a practice and there are professional people out there, and amazing agencies like yours out there actually helping people to do things with intention and with strategy, and not just kind of, throwing things against the wall to see what happens,
yeah,
what works.
yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you for coming on the show today. And I wanted to ask, there's so much in the book. I'm strongly recommending everybody go get it when you can. When does it come out? When is
And
it
we
available?
It's available on pre-order on Amazon right now, but we're actually launching it the 25th of January, which is Community Manager Appreciation Day. So we thought that would be a good moment to have our official launch. So by January 25th on Amazon, everyone's free to download the e-version of the book.
Well, hopefully we'll get you a lot of pre-orders. I'll put the link in the description, and we'll be promoting it. I definitely think that it belongs on the bookshelf of every community manager out there, and really appreciate you coming and taking the time to talk with me today.
Yeah, thank you for your kind words, Rosemary. Good to be here.
Thank you, Peter.